to arrive at our mark today. Additionally, I've had the opportunity to visit almost every ship construction yard in the United States, as well as numerous aircraft production facilities, and two things have become painfully obvious. First, over the last several years, we have woefully under-resourced the demands of the United States Navy and the United States Air Force to support the current requirements. Second, we have hot production lines in the shipbuilding and aviation sectors that are prepared to respond. What is left for Congress to decide is whether we are prepared to answer the call. Without any reservation, I believe this mark and funding recommendations will make to Chairman Thornberry, and the answer to that will be an unambiguous yes. Today is a new direction. Today is the first step in our nation's long-term commitment to restoring our readiness. Today is a time to authorize the resources, the modernization, the personnel and equipment necessary to provide our nation the military it so desperately needs. As to the mark, it builds on the 8 ships requested by the administration and adds an additional 5 ships. Specifically, the Seapower and Projection Forces Subcommittee will recommend 1 additional destroyer, 2 littoral combat ships, 1 amphibious dock landing ship, and 1 expeditionary support base. The mark also recommends additional advanced procurement revenue for aircraft carriers and attack submarines. As to aircraft, the subcommittee also recommends an expansion of the KC-46As, C-130J variants, E-2Ds, and P-8s. As to efficiency, the mark provides multi-year procurement authority for destroyers and submarines, which will result in a projected cost savings of 15%. This is equivalent to buying 7 ships for the price of 6. As to the ballistic missile submarine, the mark expands the authority to include additional components that could be more efficiently procured. The Congressional Budget Office has indicated such an approach will save several $100 million per submarine. As to aircraft carriers, the mark includes major portions of a bill offered earlier this year by Chairman Conway. Building aircraft carriers faster than 1 aircraft carrier every 5 years will allow our nation to realize the 12 aircraft carriers we need. Additionally, delivering aircraft carriers to the fleet quicker and reducing red tape will get us the required force structure. Finally, I am particularly pleased with the progress the Air Force has made on the B-21 Raider program. While it remains early in the design process, I believe that Northrop Grumman has made the B-21 program a priority and is delivering to the anticipated cost and schedule of the program. Overall, I am pleased with the progress this mark provides toward delivering the required ships and airplanes to our service members. I want to extend a very special thanks to my ranking member, Joe Courtney. His partnership and shared vision throughout this journey is particularly appreciated. And I'm heartened to believe that both Republicans and Democrats can work towards a common purpose and deliver the capabilities our nation so desperately needs. And Ranking Member Courtney, I want to thank you again so much for all the work that you've put in, and also for the staffs who work continuously together. And the good thing is, folks, when we have meetings, it's not one side of the staff or the other side of the staff. And we have meetings, these are joint meetings between staff members from both sides to make sure that we are on the same page. So I want to thank all of our staff members here for the tremendous job that they do. And the chair will now recognize Mr. Courtney, the ranking member on the subcommittee, for any opening comments he would like to make. So
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a couple brief remarks. I have a written statement, which, again, I would just ask to be submitted for the record, beginning with the fact that when you took the gavel in January, we've worked together for many years in the past. There was no one, I think, whose grasp of the content of this subcommittee, made him better prepared than you, Rob. And I just congratulate you for the fact that you've, worked so hard, and you've been, tirelessly out on the road. And I think, again, we had a very aggressive hearing schedule to sort of cope with what has been, I think, a very challenging sort of truncated schedule that we've dealt with here. I mean, when you think about the fact that the budget was not submitted until May 23rd, and we're doing a mark less than really 30 days later, in my 10 years, we've never been under that kind of pressure before to produce again, a bill for the full committee, and again, it's definitely not a stand pat mark. It's not a rubber stamp of what came over on May 23rd, to say the least. We, I think, have taken a lot of guidance from the fact that really, if you go back 3 years ago, when the cooperative strategy for 21st century Seapower was produced by, again, all the sea services chiefs that talked about the fact that, all the challenges that are going on in the world today, including obviously resurgent Russia, growing challenges in Asia Pacific, climate change. Again, there's just a lot out there that have put all of the sea services existing fleet under stress. And even though there was a doubling of ships under contract in the last 8 years versus the prior 4 years, every bit of analysis really pointed to the fact that we needed to address the fact that we're basically still relying on a legacy fleet, and there's just really a really urgent need to recapitalize to deal with that. Again, the force structure assessment came out in December, which again, from Secretary Mabus, which ratified the fact that a 355-ship Navy is warranted based on all the strategic analysis. It was not a wish list. And then in February, under Secretary Stackley's accelerated shipbuilding plan, again, his pedigree goes back 2 administrations, so he, is a very nonpartisan analysis, is what, again, I think we all sort of work together to get the mark that's before us here today. Like you, I just want to, salute our great staff, Dave Sinicki, Bruce Johnson, Jody Brignola, and Phil McNaughton, who on our side, has worked with all the members in terms of fielding all the requests prior to today. We're also joined by new counsel here, Matthew Sullivan, who was educated in Red Sox Nation at Harvard Law School and is also an ex-submariner, so, he's all good as far as I'm concerned. And again, there's going to be debate and discussion about this mark, over the coming days. And but I think the fundamental direction that this mark takes is one that, again, based on careful analysis of what our industrial base is ready to take on, and again, matching up with the input that we heard from combatant commanders, whether it was Admiral Harris or General Scaparrotti, and others, it's very connected to a real concrete need that's out there for the country today. So again, I support the mark, and I again would ask my remarks to be submitted for the record. And again, congratulations to you, Rob, for your great work.
Without objection. And Joe, thank you so much. Thanks for your leadership and your willingness to work with us. And again, a shout out to all of our staff members for the great job that they've done. This is lots of time and effort that's spent, but I think time well worth what the product we have before us represents. So again, I want to thank the staff members, and they also have been doing a lot of traveling and getting around and talking to industry and making sure that we get this right, because this truly is a team effort. The only way we get our Navy, Marine Corps team, as well as our Air Force, where they need to be, is to make sure that we are having continual conversations with members on the committee, between our staffs, with industry, with the Navy, with the Marine Corps, with the Air Force, and we've been very blessed to have that. So again, Joe, thanks so much for all of your effort. So we'll now proceed to mark up HR2810, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2018. And without objection, the first reading of this bill is dispensed with. Copies of our subcommittee mark and directive language report is made available and distributed to member offices on Tuesday, June 20th, 2017. Are there any discussion or questions on the subcommittee mark? Mr. Garamendi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not in this mark is an important element in the Seapower of the United States, and that is the Ready Reserve Fleet. I know you've been working on it, as have other members of the committee, because of the time frame, and that this issue has really come to a head very late in this process. In this mark, we do not have a solution to the recapitalization of the Ready Reserve Fleet. I believe by the time, maybe next week, When we go to the full committee, we may have such a proposal to move forward. Of great concern to me is that we maintain what is a very important part of the Navy shipbuilding, and that is they are American-made. The Ready Reserve Fleet is part of the U.S. Navy, and some of the proposals that have been put forward would allow non-American-made ships to replace ships that are aging out in the Ready Reserve Fleet. I think this is something that we must very carefully consider before we allow that opening in what is an extremely important barrier to foreign-made ships in the U.S. Navy. So I bring this to the attention of the committee. There are ways that we might be able to accomplish this. There are ships that are American-made in the Jones Act that might suffice for the Ready Reserve Fleet. We've not had time to analyze that completely. There may be some MSP ships, the Maritime Reserve Program ships that might serve, and we've not had time to complete that analysis. So I bring this to the attention of the committee. It is something that I hope that we would pursue together to assure that the American shipbuilding industry is busy making not only the ships that are in the mark, but also the Ready Reserve ships that will have to replace those that are aging out. I leave it.
Will the gentleman yield?
Of course.
I would ask the chairman if we come to an agreement before next week that this committee, that this subcommittee asks the full committee to put that on block in the chairman's mark, if we can come to something that at least starts a process go in the direction that we want it to go.
Mr. Hunter, I'm glad to do that. We'll continue this discussion. As you know, we've had discussions with the industry, obviously members. It is an important element of what we need to do. We need to find out what is possible. We don't want to put something in the mark that's not possible. So I will continue to work, Mr. Garamendi, with you, Mr. Hunter, with you, as we go down that road. I am glad to offer that in en bloc amendments going forward. We'll make sure, too, that our staffs are part of that discussion to make sure we cover all the bases, as well as making sure we have good discussions with industry, because we want to make sure that whatever we put in there is something that's attainable and can be accomplished. So I'm very willing to continue to work with both the members here, as well as anybody else that has an interest in this.
I thank the chairman for that, and my attitude is to push the industry.
Well, I would agree. Our desire ultimately is to make sure that that all those ships are not just U.S. flagged, but U.S. made. So
thank you.
We appreciate that. Thank you. All right, I want to remind members that the discussion is limited to the 5-minute rule, but now we're going to Mr. Conway.
Well, thank you, Chairman. As you said in your opening comments, the mark raises the statutory limit for carriers from 11 to 12. That has advantages across a broad spectrum. Operational tempo for 12 is better than the operational tempo for 11, both in terms of the crews as well as the long lives of the carriers themselves. And not only does it help our combatant commanders get what they need at a time when they need it, it also puts a mark down to our competitors that the advantage, Seapower advantage that we've long enjoyed will be continued and it won't erode. So with that, I appreciate my other colleagues on the committee agreeing to this and putting the 12th Carrier Act into the mark. So thank you. You're back.
Chairman Conway, thank you. We'll now go to Dr. Abraham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank all the subcommittee members and staff. You've done some yeoman's work here. The only thing I'm concerned about, continuing the discussion that we just had, is the provision restricting certain maritime security program vessels from operating between the U.S. and its territories. As written, I'm afraid that this section has the potential to restrict the ability of many military useful privately owned U.S. flag vessels in the MSP from delivering essential military cargo to Guam. And given the ongoing tension in the Pacific, I don't believe we should further restrict how our troops are supplied in Guam. I've been assured by all sides that this was not the language intent, but we cannot seem to agree upon a fix. And Mr. Chairman, I just ask that your commitment and the commitment of the members and staff of the subcommittee just to continue working together between now and next Wednesday to make sure that we get the language right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Abraham, and we will continue to do that. We've had good discussions amongst members, obviously a lot of different viewpoints here. We're trying to come up with ultimately what is in the best interest of the nation and make sure, as you said, we have that capacity. We are not where we need to be, as we know in talking to folks to Transcom. We also know there's some disparities there amongst the different companies that we need to make sure we keep in mind. So we're trying to make sure that we are fair and thoughtful to everyone that's involved in this. So continual conversations with committee members will be there, and we are glad to continue that discussion as well as reflect that as we move into the mark next week. Other members, any other members would like to speak? All right, if there is no further discussion, the chair lays before the members the text of the subcommittee mark for consideration. And without objection, the mark is open to amendment at any point. Are there any amendments to the subcommittee mark? I'm going to ask unanimous consent to call up an en bloc package of amendments that have been worked and approved with the minority. Without objection, so ordered. Will the clerk please pass out the en bloc amendment? Without objection, the amendments are considered as read. The en bloc package is comprised of the following. Amendment number 1 by Mr. Hunter and Mr. Garamendi, authorizing the use of the National Defense Sea Lift Fund for the construction of national icebreaker vessels. Amendment number 3 by Mr. Hunter concerning an administrative reorganization of Chapter 46 of Title 10 of the United States Code. And Amendment number 4 by Mr. Bridenstine, providing an exclusion for icebreakers to procure certain components for auxiliary ships from the U.S. industrial base. Is there any further discussion on the en bloc package? If there's no further discussion, the question is on the adoption of the en bloc amendment. So many as are in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the en bloc amendment is adopted. Are there any further amendments? Seeing none, the question now occurs on the adoption of the mark as amended. So many as are in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the mark is adopted. The chair will now recognize the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Byrne, for the purpose of a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the subcommittee report the mark as amended favorably to the full committee.
The question is on the motion from the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Byrne. So many as are in favor of the motion shall signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. A quorum being present, the ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. And without objection, a motion to reconsider is now laid upon the table. Without objection, members have 5 legislative days within which to submit written statements into the record. So ordered. I also ask unanimous consent that the staff be authorized to make necessary conforming, technical, and clerical changes and to remove from the mark, as amended, provisions that would cause the mark to refer to other committees or would result in additional direct spending or would result in an earmark. Without objection, so ordered. There being no further legislative business before the subcommittee, this meeting is adjourned.